is up, guys? It's bright and early here on the West Coast, but yet here we are for another 14-game MLB slate that we will go game by game and talk about all the bats, talk about all the pitching you're going to need to know for today. And I am Chris Spags, joined once again by my brother in arms here on the West Coast. Joining me in this journey through the MLB world, he's Eric Lindquist. How are you doing, Eric?
Oh, doing all right. It felt like in high school when you completely procrastinated on an exam, and I was like, I just didn't have it in me to go through the slate last night, and so I woke up early this morning, had some coffee, still feeling a little out of it, but I know that the energy that we end up having going back and forth, we're going to be able to pull through this. We have 14 games, so much to get to. I really like the slate. I think it's an exceptional slate. A lot of leverage spots that we can go to. Not a bunch of crazy run totals. The spots that we have for ownership are pretty obvious. So let's get to it.
Yeah, we got, let's get the plugs out of the way first. And actually, I'm going to ask you one question, Eric, that we talked about before the show, because I want to bring it to the people based on some of the winner on DraftKings yesterday that was being debated in our premium Slack before the show that I was digging through. But first of all, make sure you go check out our free premium tool of the day. It's going to be the MLB Top Stacks. It's one of the premium tools we talk about a lot as part of our Awesemo Plus MLB offerings. But today it is free on the site, so go check it out. Obviously, we'll update throughout the day as well, reflecting the chance of being a top stack, chance of being a top value stack, and also the ownership number on there for each aggregate ownership of the stack. So go check that out on the site. Also, make sure to go check out PrizePicks, who's a sponsor of this show and offering the simplest fantasy game on the market where you could say goodbye to sharks, lineup optimizers, and mass multi-entry. All you have to do is pick 2, 3, 4, 5 players available on the board, and all you have to do is go under or over their projected score. If you correctly select the 5-player lineup, you'll get 10x your entry fee. They have the NFL, they have the NBA, they have the WNBA, they have the MLB, they have esports. PrizePicks has them all. You can also make cross-sport parlays with whatever you're seeing across all those sports that you're tracking. So go check them out, download them in the App Store or on Google Play, and make your first deposit. Get an instant deposit match of $100 when you use the promo code Awesemo. Simplify daily fantasy with PrizePicks today. And honestly, one line for me that I'll just throw in the mix: Tariq Skubal, 6.5 strikeouts. That's his line on the betting markets as well. I like the under on that one. I think Skubal going against a team like the Cardinals who doesn't strike out a bunch, not the spot for him today, but that's just one of my thoughts. Play it as you want to see it, though, over at PrizePicks. You have the flexibility to play the game however you want on PrizePicks with the promo code Awesemo for $100 deposit match. But Eric, real fast, because you mentioned you were doing some research for the slate starter, digging into some lineup study to see what happened yesterday. And I just want to, there was some guys in chat who were debating some of the Excel stuff and how to figure that out. And an important part of the process for a lot of us out there and just, figuring how to sort lineups, how to get your data and manipulate it how you want on Excel. But they were saying like, oh, JBC must be this guy just coming in off NBA. He's going to win one slate. And that's it. Like it's a total fish. And it's like, first of all, I think it's not your job to track other top players and know what they're doing, but it is important to kind of know like, hey, this is a guy who's been good across a lot of sports, who I think has some track record of whatever he's doing in his real life as well as a sports analytics guy. But just knowing, that this guy, what he's doing, it's not just dumb luck. It's not somebody throwing things against the wall and letting them stick. It's an actual approach, Eric. And you did the research. Just give us a quick little elevator pitch on what you learned from digging into the lineup study from last night.
Yeah, so I'll start with Sunday night. So Sunday night, I talked about some ways to get contrarian, talked about building 4-4s on DraftKings, even on getting, not just going to the strict 5-3s, 5-2s like we normally do on a shorter slate because it was only 6 games, that there could be some viability to targeting some of the better hitting bats or just some more power in some spots and going like 4-3-1s and mixing it around that way. And sure enough, JBC ends up getting first with a technically it's a 5-5 if you include the pitchers, but it's technically a 4-4, 4 batters from both Houston and from San Diego. I will say though, it really speaks to how highly variant baseball can be, because if you take away his winning lineup, his best result is 824th. He doesn't have a single other top 800 lineup out of his 148 lineups, but it's not like he didn't build lineups correctly. He had an amazing portfolio of players. Yu Darvish was his highest owned pitcher at 40.5%, just barely over the field. Jake Odorizzi, 28.4%. He was more than triple the field on the guy who ended up being the second best pitcher on the slate behind you. So he absolutely nailed down the pitching corridor. And then 2 of his 3 highest owned batters were Yordan Alvarez and Michael Brantley. So I think that it's really difficult when you have like 4 of the most like unbelievable spots. Like he nailed the top 2 pitchers, he nailed the top 2 outfielders, and he still only had one lineup that finished in the top 800. I think it just speaks to being able to embrace the variance, being able to build different combinations of stacks, finding ways to get unique without being crazy. And obviously, I don't think that the correlation matters that much to have the pitchers along with your stack. That's not going to be something that we're going to be looking at doing long term, but it definitely added a little bit more correlation to his lineup as well. And, hitting 100K is a hard thing to do, but he had a couple of different lineup stacks. He had 3-2-2s. He had some 5-1-1-1 where every single one was a spend up towards the top end for his batters. He didn't have a single lineup that paid underneath 49,700. So he basically said, you know what, I'm going to be paying up for my one-offs. I'm going to be paying up for all my stacks on this entire slate. And that's going to be my path to getting different.
Yep. So it's interesting to note there, and you're still seeing a correlated lineup as we talked about for some of the people playing DFS for the first time yesterday. The correlation is key, having your stacks line up so that you are creating extra at-bat opportunities for the rest of the guys on the team. And that's something to keep in mind on DraftKings. You're normally trying to get to 5-man stacks. But for him, he got to still a correlated 4-man. So just something to keep in mind here. Different things can win. And I think too, on the other side of it, where even if you're learning and you're getting sharper, I would just, generally say, to not think that other people are making fish plays necessarily, especially when they are a MME person who's putting in 150 entries. Normally those are guys who've done the research and know that, to be good at this night after night, you have to have some shot at either winning overall or being profitable, hitting that cash line for a bunch of the lineups. And that's the kind of thing, the kind of luxury you earn, I guess, when you spend the time putting the research in or whatever, is being able to be more creative with the process. So keep that in mind. And obviously things are going to be different on every slate. So also keep that in mind. Don't just put in 4 stacks today and hope you can capture it. Let's get into the game by game here, and let's start with a game that was very popular yesterday that was debated down the line because of the weather issues involved. But Houston and Baltimore is going to be the first one here. Houston 5.3 implied runs against Jorge Lopez. Jorge Lopez certainly has been attacked at times throughout the year, but a guy who, for the most part, the one thing he has going for him, a low launch angle, 7 degrees for him, does give him more home runs, a 4.5% home run rate, league average strikeout guy, or at least the old league average. This year he would be under at a 22.3%. Lopez, not a pitcher you should be playing today. Houston bats, though, I think people will go there a lot again today. And I think, the weather not quite as favorable as well today, 70 degrees, 68% humidity compared to the 80 and 80 we had yesterday. So this spot, to me, Houston's ownership jumps off in a major way on a 14-game slate. And today's the day I think you would go under on them by a wide margin, barring some weather weirdness here that, again, makes them under-owned. There's a lot going to these guys, and Jorge Lopez, I think, is going to give up hits, Eric, but I don't see him getting bombed out and giving up a ton of power. I think he's going to generate runs, and certainly Houston will generate runs against him, but I just don't think this is the spot where they're going to tee off. And the ownership right now is looking like Coors ownership, and that, to me, is just not the right move on a slate of this size.
Yeah, and 42.5% hard hit percentage is not good, but it's not like we've got some other spots on this slate that are even better. This just speaks to the ballpark. It speaks to this team that doesn't strike out. It speaks to all of the different things that kind of encompass why they're getting nearly 20% ownership here on a 14-gamer. They also didn't burn anybody yesterday. I will say, if I could go back in time, I probably wouldn't have had many Houston Astros if I had known that they were still, some of those top batters were still going to be around 25-30% owned yesterday. I was kind of going through the ownership and thinking people were going to get off, but apparently everybody rode the train with us. I didn't see that necessarily happening, but I think because they didn't burn anybody, because it is such an obvious spot, and it is the highest implied total on the slate, I don't think that there's any question that this is going to be the highest owned spot. I think we've seen ownership change a little bit throughout the day, but that's not going to change off a dude with a pretty bad portfolio of talent here in Jorge Lopez, who just doesn't get dudes out.
Yeah, he doesn't get guys out, but doesn't, to me, the home runs, I think, will be there for one guy or two. And I think, it's more of a case for the one-offs and all that. But yeah, the ownership here being this lofty, particular Jose Altuve, Michael Brantley, Jordan Alvarez, and Abraham Toro, once again, going to be highly owned. And this is something that we didn't talk about this, but I actually ended up with a different line construction because I didn't pace my lineups while we were doing the show, my final run. So I didn't end up with the abundance of Abraham Toro. I ended up with the field on him. Just a guy who doesn't have power, doesn't really have speed either. And I think that's one of the guys that normally in a stack you're trying to avoid, even at 2,100, like in cash. I guess you could play him if that's you're kind of masochist who's playing MLB cash. But to me, just a guy right away, Eric, that you should probably be a little more mindful of taking out of a player pool, or at least knocking down that exposure cap to a much lower number.
Yeah, I agree. I think Abraham Toro is going to be crazy owned because he's still 2,100. He gives you the lineup flexibility, and we have some actual studs to be paying up for on this slate. I think between Garrett Cole, Zach Wheeler, Max Scherzer, if you want to be going that route too. I mean, there's so many dudes on the top end that I think are more viable to be paying up for. Whereas yesterday it was basically Yu Darvish and everybody else, and Yu Darvish was in a tough spot, so I don't think that it needed to be as prioritized. So with Abraham Toro, that's going to be a big part where Toro is going to be paired with the Garrett Coles, and he's going to be able to make people play Houston. He's going to allow people to play Houston along with these other studs. I think I'm willing on these kind of slates. A thing that I do a lot with Coors slates and everything else is I just take them all out of my pool. I'm very unlikely with 27 other teams on this slate to have any Houston Astros. And if that ends up being the thing that burns me, I mean, we're looking at 15 to 20% ownership on these guys. As you said, they're getting Coors ownership, and it's not necessarily justified for a guy, as you said, keeping the launch angle down. There's home runs to be had across the league. I think I'll take my chances elsewhere.
Yeah, and also one other weather factor, wouldn't expect to be blowing in a little bit as well to right, but in. So, not as humid, not as hot today. People chasing the day that happened yesterday. I think there's a good logic here to what Eric's talking about, just not playing a ton of Houston. Zach Greinke on the other side, you could talk me into playing him if he were cheaper. And this is something that I was talking with Eric before the show, that I talked myself out of Jake Odorizzi as the day went on because the projection just wasn't there. And I thought on the morning show I did with Greg, I was like, he looks like an interesting play. You pay down to do for some positive regression. I do feel the same way about Zach Greinke. The issue is that he's not in the 5K or 6K range like Odorizzi was. He's $9,000 on DraftKings. So to me, Greinke, 18% K rate, probably due to get closer to the 22% K rate he's had since 2019. Those swinging strike rates down a little bit. I just think it's going to level out. His velocity has been basically flat. It's not like he's a guy who's been throwing any gas anyway. He's just throwing whatever he can over the plate and hoping he can kind of trick guys into getting strikeouts. That's going to happen at some point. So maybe he does have a decent day today, but at 9K, I don't know how he pays it off. And I also think he's not bad enough that I don't want the Baltimore bats very much, especially given the hitting conditions not being that good. So to me, Eric, no Zach Greinke and no Baltimore seems in order.
Yeah, I think that the thing we might have overlooked a little bit yesterday, and I'm kind of mad at myself about it too, because I ended up getting to a little bit of Jake Odorizzi. I moved all my J.A. Happ. I was talking about at the end of Live Before Lock Together that was going to be a move that I was making. Thought that there was a little bit more upside there, and I figured that game was going to play. However, there are some massive splits here for Baltimore between the two sides. I mean, they definitely are known to be more lefty mashers. It's minute, but 24% K percentage up against lefties on the season. That goes up to around 25.6%, 25.4% against righties. Also, a WRC plus of 83, completely kind of inept against righties in that spot, as opposed to against lefties. They're just a little bit better. I believe the XFIP was a little bit better in that spot. So I think against righties, I'm more inclined to take some shots there. We talked about some of the lefties as well from Baltimore, Cedric Mullins being a guy that you can possibly take as a one-off in spots. But Zach Greinke's been pretty good at what Zach Greinke does. He limits the hard contact, kind of makes sure that it's underneath 35% hard hit percentage on the season. He doesn't walk dudes, doesn't strike out a lot of guys. I think on a different slate, I'd have a lot of Zach Greinke interest, but probably not the highest upside dude, but probably safer, more of a cashy type play.
Next game up, we got
that, by the way.
Yes, that's a good way to make sure to say, like, hey, I don't think he's a terrible play, but not somebody I want to play in tournaments. Washington getting a no run total going at Zach Wheeler is going to be up next. I think there's no run total in this one because Max Scherzer was expected to be pitching, but I think that's not confirmed yet because I think he's still got a Q tag on him technically. But let's talk about the Zach Wheeler side going against Washington, and this spot for Wheeler, been good in every situation. I saw Wheeler pitch in person last week and honestly thought that he was looking better, obviously in person relative to what I know, which is not a lot, as you know, watching these shows. But Zach Wheeler, I thought, looked better than Clayton Kershaw on that spot. Certainly had better results as well. On the year, 32% K rate, 0.93 whip, 2.8 xFIP. All these marks are going to be right there with anybody else in terms of top pitching on the slate. Overall, though, Wheeler, I feel like the 15% ownership expected for him on DraftKings feels about right. It's not an easy Washington lineup to get through. 22.7% K rate for them on the year against right-hand pitching. And Wheeler's not getting a discount for a matchup that should be pretty tough. And also pretty high humidity here, 90% humidity, the only 65-degree weather, but that ball can fly a little bit more, as we saw in the San Diego game yesterday. That was another high humidity spot with not the hottest weather. So something to keep in mind a little bit there. But Wheeler, I get it. I think being with the field seems like the move. I don't want to go crazy on him because the price tag is still there. Projection not fantastic, and Washington does have some dangerous hitters, Eric, but bottom of the order is bad enough that I don't mind it. I just feel like Wheeler, it's not the ideal spot for him, and on a slate this big, I just don't think you need to go crazy on Zach Wheeler.
I like him though. I really do. And I've just kind of been betting on the talent here the last couple outings. I had a bigger wager against him against Clayton Kershaw. He limited a Dodger team that has been decent against righties, and Zach Wheeler keeping that hard hit rate down, 30.4% hard hit percentage on the season. Exit velocity, 85.4. I mean, those are kind of elite numbers to be looking at for Zach Wheeler. Just kind of a pitcher we saw with the Mets, and he's kind of bringing that over here. When he gets hit hard. Max exit velocity at the 1 percentile, but everything else is just absolutely elite for this guy. He also throws with velocity. So this might be something, and I wanted to bounce this off you because this is something I've been thinking about with the spin rates and everything else. We've got guys, Garrett Cole and Zach Wheeler with pitchers over 750 pitches on the entire season, 97.3 97.3 mile per hour four seamers. I think that's going to help. Even if the RPMs go down, I think at least having the velocity behind them with this sticky stuff, with everything coming out of it, that should be helpful to at least manage outings, not to necessarily see a huge dip. What do you think about that? Do you think that kind of affects it maybe a little bit more? Like it might not affect them as much as it will other pitchers who throw at 93, 92, or rely on that spin rate to get guys out?
I mean, they're still going to be a little bit looser on pitches. Like I agree for the strikeout stuff, which is what we care about for fantasy. That's going to be the most important part. But that was actually something where I think might have been Josh Donaldson, but one of the hitters who talked about it publicly mentioned, like, we don't like the hitters are, speaking on behalf of all of them. Obviously that's not going to be necessarily be the case, but saying that like, hey, we don't mind these guys having sticky stuff because then they control the ball more and we're not going to get hit by, a screaming 100 mile per hour fastball quite as much. So I think you still lose a little bit in the way of control and obviously a little bit in the way of spin rate. But I would agree that having blowaway stuff, certainly you're going to be a little more insulated against whatever downside can come. So like, I agree. I think there's still obviously going to be downside like there would be, but for a guy like Wheeler, who on the year, 3.8 pitches per batter faced is like a pretty good mark in addition to his actual pitch count. So like he's been keeping the pitches under control. And I think that's something that I don't anticipate changing for him, but I didn't look enough at Wheeler's spin rates to really feel comfortable saying that full-throatedly. But what I remember, like I feel like Wheeler was not one of the guys who should be deeply affected, and I agree, having the velocity too, definitely a cosign that he could still get strikeouts around the 32% rate he's had all year.
Yeah, the slider, I mean, he throws a slider 25% of the time. So, I mean, that might be the one pitch that I'll track the spin as we're going, but I don't know what to make out of everything. I know that I want to be short on them in the prop market, but now the numbers are starting to have that baked into them. I think that a lot of the goodness that was there maybe last week has kind of been zapped out of a lot of these K props. But at the same time, for fantasy, Zach Wheeler is just not a guy who gives up a lot of hard contact, which against this Washington team is great. Also, 5.2% barrel percentage on the season. I mean, those are elite numbers. And so I like taking some shots on him. I'll be a little bit over the field if he's going to be around 12-14%.
Blitz saying in the chat that it might be a Zimmerman day for the Nationals. I don't think he's in the projected lineup I have, but certainly a guy that I would have no issue with if he were in. To me, the Washington lineup, though, I don't really want to go against Wheeler. As Eric mentioned, there is a high max exit velocity for Wheeler, actually one of the worst marks on the slate at just shy of 119 miles per hour. But the low barrel ball rate means it's not happening very often. So to me, if you're targeting these guys, you're hoping to get that one home run, or maybe have some guys on base for that one home run. But the top four here look good: Schwarber, Turner, Soto, Bell. The rest of it, though, falls off a cliff where I really don't want Yan Gomes when he's not going against a lefty. Everybody else, Josh Harrison under a 100 ISO against righty since 2019. Starlin Castro doesn't have a lot. Robles doesn't have a lot. To me, the Washington stack, you get me a little bit of it just because of that top four, but I don't see a lot of utility in the bats, Eric, unless you feel differently.
No, and I mean, Kyle Schwarber was the most frustrating human being in the entire world. Back-to-back double dong, I guess triple dong game the last time out, but he was cheap and just kind of going off against every single one of my pitchers, even though they only gave up like 5 runs or 6 runs or whatever it was this weekend. So Kyle Schwarber, I'll probably have like 2 or 3% just out of FOMO reasons. But other than that, Josh Bell would be the only other guy. I don't think it'll be Zimmerman. It's probably going to be Josh Bell. And so I would think that I would still have some shots on him, 54.7% hard hit percentage. And as I said, that exit velocity number, 93.4 average exit velocity for Josh Bell. That's a big, big number. I would be taking some shots there.
And then it's supposed to be Max Scherzer going on the other side, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. So we'll talk about it like that is going to be the case. But Scherzer, 36% K rate would certainly be one of the better pitching options on the slate overall. I guess you could have maybe some pitch count questions for him, but overall in the year, 92 pitches per appearance. And if unless you get a report indicating otherwise, I think targeting more for Max seems like the move, given just the guy he's been historically. Don't love the price tag on him. The projection does look pretty good going against a Philly lineup that strikes out at a 25.2% clip on the year against right-hand pitching. Also a low 140 ISO. Guys like Rhys Hoskins get much worse against right-hand pitching than they do against lefties. So something to keep in mind there. I like Scherzer if he's in. I feel like the price tag's a little bit ugly on a slate where you do have Wheeler a little bit cheaper. You have Garrett Cole in a similar price range as well. But I think Scherzer, to me, if he's in, Eric, I feel like is the play. And Phillies bats, to me, I don't think have a ton of utility. And, if you got some as one-offs, I think given the home runs that Scherzer's given up historically, I think that's fine. Also a high 21-degree launch angle that could play well in the humidity. So, but I still think Scherzer's the better option overall. So that's where I'm landing with it.
Yep, same. And as you said, Philly, 25.2% K percentage. Also 85 WRC plus. I mean, they're bottom 6 in the league, 25th in all of baseball out of 30 teams. I am not feeling very good about Philly up against right-handed pitching here at the moment. I'm pretty sure that I'm kind of on board with you there. If you want to take some one-offs here, sure. This is definitely not a stack spot against Max Scherzer on a 14-game slate for me. If that were to burn me, whatever. But I have no desire to be going to any Philly bats.
All right, here's the game we can make up some time and help us out, guys. Hit that like button if you can. Of course, subscribe to the channel as well. We have content going on. Got the NBA strategy show, which I've hopefully ended by this point, but it might still be going on. But we have that going on if you are playing the single game today. Also, we have MLB content throughout the day. The deeper dive in MLB Live Before Lock will be back. And actually, I will be on the Live Before Lock show, and Eric will be on the deeper dive show. So you get us one more time here talking about the slate. But obviously, we have content all the time here, so check it out. And if you ever miss any of the YouTube shows, make sure to go to the Awesemo Podcast Network and subscribe to those feeds. You get them all over at awesemo.com/podcast. And if you leave 5 stars and a review on them with your Twitter handle or your email address, you could be entered to win a free week of Awesemo Plus. So that's actually going to be the easiest way for you to win that free week, because sometimes people just don't do that enough. So go check that out. They give those away every Friday, but also just subscribe to the podcast feed to get shows like this one in your podcast apps whenever you want. Next game up, and this is one I think we can make some time up on. White Sox going against Tyler Anderson. Tyler Anderson, to me, a play that I'm not trying to get to very much today. 21% K rate guy. Price tag, to me, not the most appealing. And the weather here, though, should benefit the pitching. 64-degree weather, 50% humidity. So the bats probably should have a tough time going to this spot. White Sox on the year have been hitting lefties decently well, a 122 WRC plus, 182 ISO. But with the park factors favoring the pitching, to me, I don't know that I want to get crazy on the White Sox themselves. Though I think they do look more appealing to Tyler Anderson. So Eric, for you, Tyler Anderson or the White Sox, do either really meaningfully jump out?
Not meaningfully. I would say that the total is up there a little bit. It's in a place where I probably want to be getting some exposure to a team with a 4.8 total. I got to think on this slate that's going to be something that jumps out. We don't have anything that's really meaningful above 5 outside of Houston, outside of the Cubs. And we'll get to those. We'll get to the Cubs later. That'll be another chalky spot to be looking at. But I think because we're getting a little bit of leverage right now, top stack percentage right around 4.8%. That sounds about right. I mean, that's a 1 in 20. That's better than your average on this slate. So I like getting to some White Sox bats. As you said, been pretty decent against lefties. That's kind of the handedness we want to go to. Second best WRC plus in all of baseball. I can't see any reason why I wouldn't have some White Sox stacks today.
Yeah, Andrew Vaughn being 3,200, I think, is also pretty appealing, especially if he somehow ends up a little bit higher than 6th in the order, which is what he's projected to be at right now. And also Adam Engel, I think, will pop up an optimizer a little bit as a value play on the day. $3,300 price tag for him. Expect to be hitting in the 2-hole. But yeah, I think the White Sox a little more appealing than Tyler Anderson, though. I wish the weather were better here, because I think that would make the White Sox a little more appealing of a stack. And but let's talk about Lucas Giolito on the other side. He'll be very highly owned, almost 35% expected ownership on DraftKings. Price tag going to be lower than some of the other most lively arms on the slate. But Giolito's right there with him in terms of results. 31% K rate, 3.5 xFIP. And really the one thing you can point to that's not great for him is the high launch angle of 20 degrees, attacking high in the plate. But this Pittsburgh team has no power anyway besides Brian Hayes, so probably doesn't matter that much. But Pittsburgh on the year, 22.4% K rate. I guess the main thing you could say that could inhibit Giolito here. And I like Giolito relative to the price tag. I feel like for a slate this big, to me, he's a guy you kind of have to get less ownership than, just try to get different. But Eric, what are your thoughts on Giolito? And I guess would you be riding with the chalk with about a third of the field expected to be on him?
So his average spin rate on a four-seamer is 2430 RPM. So I think that there might be something here. Not the craziest amount of velocity here. Let me click over on this. I don't know why it's taking a
He's
little
at
bit longer.
93.7. I have Matt
93.7 isn't your fastest fastball on planet Earth. And so I think that there might be some regression here coming for him specifically. Also giving up a pretty large 20.4 degree launch angle here on the season. I don't know. This feels like with the wind blowing out to right field, righty here up against a team that, doesn't seem like it would really stand out meaningfully. I think guys like Colin Moran, Gregory Polanco, I think that they're people that I'd probably want to take some shots on. Brian Reynolds as well. That makes like an intriguing, really, really contrarian three-man with some leverage there. We've seen some pop out of them here of late. I wouldn't completely hate the idea of having some contrarian Pittsburgh interest here. And obviously it's going to be a very popular pitcher, and he should be with all of his marks here on the season. He's nearly, though, a 40% hard hit percentage. So I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate and just say that I could see Pittsburgh having a 2 or a 3-man workout today.
Next game up, we got Kansas City getting 2.7 implied runs against Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole, one of the other chalkiest pitchers on the slate, with a price tag to match. Despite whatever spin rate issues he's had, he's still at a 35% K rate on the year. So he's basically stabilized as a lower mark than where he was earlier in the year, but still getting good results. And a lot of it kind of ties to what we talked about with Zach Wheeler. A 97.3 mile per hour fastball for Garrett Cole is going to still get you good results. In addition, just him being a pitcher who knows how to work things. 0.85 whip, 2.6 xFIP. I feel like Garrett Cole going against Kansas City, who doesn't strike out a lot, is again the one thing you can point to here, under league average with a 22.1% K rate against right-hand pitching. But besides that, humid day, I guess, in Yankee Stadium, we know there can be some power risk with how Cole's pitched recently, 86% humidity. But I feel like Cole, another guy I would get less of than the field, I think, just, given the risk profile and the fact we do have some arms to go to. But 42% ownership feels lofty. But I think, if you're getting anywhere under that, it's me 30%, 25%, I think feels a little more comfortable. I feel like that's a good mark for Garrett Cole, and I have no issue. I certainly wouldn't take him out of a player pool today.
Yeah, no, you're sharp about that. I think I'm doing the exact same thing. If the slate were to start right now with their current ownership levels, 41% for Garrett Cole, 35% about for Lucas Giolito over on DK, I think I'd be half the field on both of them and take my shots. We don't know how a lot of this stuff is going to work out with the sticky stuff. I think we can meaningfully understand that it's not going to be as good, and we're not going to have as good of K profiles on them. And if that's going to be the case with strikeouts being more highly variant than what they were before, I think that we could probably be a little bit lighter on both of them, use that money to go spend up on batters, to go spend up on some guys with some power, to get some more contrarian stacks that the entire field's going to just be jamming both of those guys in. But obviously, if you're playing any kind of a cash game, I think Garrett Cole has to be your first guy in over on DraftKings. There's really nothing that you can point at. He's been getting it done in a multitude of ways here as well. The hard hit percentage has been up this season. That's not as great to see, but 253 ex WOBA, 354x slugging, 35% K percentage. Obviously, the Kansas City Royals don't strike out that much. And we saw in the last outing, though, that Garrett Cole's a guy that can still get it done. He went 8 innings, only 4 strikeouts in that spot against Toronto, which, again, is a team that doesn't strike out nearly as much as well. But he's going deeper into the games, the controls there. I have no problem with Garrett Cole.
Brady Singer going on the other side, getting 4.8 implied runs against him with the Yankees bats. And Singer, to me, a value option that I could see popping up on an optimizer. He's going to be 2% owned, probably for good reason. Low barrel ball rate, low launch angle guy on the year, but not a high strikeout rate guy with only a 23.3% clip so far. The Yankees do strike out a little bit above league average of 25.3% carried, and also a 153 ISO. That's not that great, though. The projected lineup they have right now, I would think, should be a little bit better with a 207 ISO with some of the guys in the mix, at least based on their sample size of 2019. But Singer, to me, as a value option, I wouldn't be opposed, especially if we saw a little more Yankees ownership going there. I know we normally try to go the reverse leverage, trying to get a pitcher in there, but I think it is a positive for a guy like Singer if he just cobbles together a decent day. And his pitch count's also been solid historically at 85 pitches per appearance so far this year. That Singer, to me, not an attractive option, Eric, but a guy that I think you can use a little bit. And to me, the Yankees bats, I think, are also fine here, but I wouldn't say a priority. I'm actually kind of surprised they don't have higher top stack odds.
Me too. And Brady Singer's 5,300 over on DK. And that, if you want to talk about getting different on a slate, if you want to be paying up for some outrageous bats, that's going to be your path to doing it. If you want to be playing some contrarian, expensive bats in some spots, like we saw San Diego yesterday, where nobody wanted to play them against Julio Urias, and they end up being kind of the keys to the castle. And they're just too expensive, and you wouldn't ever get them in an optimizer. But Brady Singer would be your path to being able to pay up for teams like that in a similar spot where you can get that upside in your bats.
Yep. So I think that's a good way to look at it as well. Yankees bats, anybody jump out to you here if you are going to go the other way? Because it seems like the field's at least going to be owning Luke Voigt's a good amount here. And certainly the power's there for him, though. Price tag as well, 2,700 is going to be the main thing, I think, driving that one in addition to his power. But any Yankees bats would you find to be a priority? I feel like Singer's been good enough that, again, I don't feel the most confident they're going to really get to him in the way and really have the power results you'd want to see. But I think there's an argument to be made for something here. It's just, the price tags are all over the place. $6K for Stanton, then you have the cheap Voit, you have cheap Gleyber Torres, and you have expensive Judge. It doesn't make sense as a stack, but I think there's probably something in here.
I don't know if Luke Voigt's going to be in the lineup. He was on the IL. I know he had a rehab assignment. Let me find out. I don't think Luke Voit is going to be in the game today. He played, when is that, from the 19th? He hasn't played yet since May 25th. Maybe he ends up in there. But at this point in time, I'm not probably going to be banking on that. Gittins or LeMahieu ends up playing a lot of the first base in that spot. Yeah, I think it's the normal suspects here for the Yankees. You've got Stanton, you've got Judge, you've got Sanchez, all just smacking the crap out of the ball. I think if we're talking about, obviously you can't play Singer with those Yankees, but that would be kind of the spot where if I'm paying down at pitching, if I'm going to be playing a guy like Eduardo Rodriguez, who we'll talk about a little bit later, going to Stanton and Judge, that's a nifty little two-man I'll want to get to.
All right, next game up, we got Boston getting 3.8 implied runs going against Andrew Kittredge. Kittredge basically an open here, throwing 17 pitches per plate appearance, or per start rather, so far this year. Tampa Bay's bullpen also going to be pretty good behind Kittredge, and this low Boston total, I think, in addition to the park downgrade they'll have today pitching or playing in Tampa Bay. Kittredge shouldn't be a guy you play, and the Boston bats, I feel like, not the most appealing here, just given a bullpen day. They're going to face the worst possible matchups they can. I think this is probably not the day to play Boston, though. They will be entirely unowned, it looks like.
Yeah, I think just this is a bad ballpark. It's a bad spot. As you said, bullpen games aren't things that you want to be going crazy with. I think you said that recently on a show, and it's a very sharp point where you just don't want to be picking on good bullpens. You don't want to be picking on that where they can kind of mix and match, try to target hitters in a specific way. And with a data forward, analytics driven team like Tampa Bay, that's just asking for problems.
The other side, we have Eduardo Rodriguez going, low price tag for him, a 27% K rate, going against Tampa Bay team that on the year, striking out 28.4% of the time against left-hand pitching. And I think this is a day where you can go to Eduardo Rodriguez. I think there also will be ownership going to Tampa Bay. Earlier in the chat, people were talking about a chalk Wander Franco making his debut. He's not going to be that chalky. Looks like we have him at 11% right now, despite being the minimum salary on DraftKings. But certainly guys had tremendous results in minor league baseball, and a guy who's clearly a top prospect for very good reason. Based on those results, I think he had a 330 batting average when I was looking at it. I didn't pull his full line this morning, but certainly a guy, the numbers do back out the hype profile that you know of him. But still, Rodriguez, just you got to take the team on its face. And if they are going to strike out a 28% clip, I think that's a nice mark to go for Eduardo Rodriguez, who's only going to be 14% owned on DK with that price tag as well. I think it's a Rodriguez spot that I can get to today, Eric. But to me, it's still not one I would go crazy on. It's a gigantic slate here. And certainly getting a bat like Wander in there can be good if he is going to be the guy that we've seen in the minors. But this spot, to me, I think Rodriguez looks pretty good.
He does. He looks really good. And I'm kind of nervous about how much interest I have here in a guy like him because it's just the results haven't been there. But just because the results haven't been there in the way that we want them to doesn't mean that he's not pitching phenomenally well. I would say pitch count is definitely one of the major concerns that I have here, but under 90% expected or exit velocity this entire season, 35.1% hard hit percentage, K rate around 27%, not walking, dude, 6.2% on the season. Everything, like pretty much every single box is checked by Eduardo Rodriguez except for pitch count, and we know that he can kind of get pulled at a moment's notice. So I like Eduardo Rodriguez. I think he'll be one of my bigger stands on the slate if it were to start right now. We'll see what that ownership kind of levels out at, but currently only an 8.1% top 2 percentage. I will also say Alex Baker's been playing a ton of him, going through a lot of lineup study stuff. I always try to fall in line with who I believe is the number one baseball player in the world, and that would be Awesemo Alex Baker. So Eduardo Rodriguez is a guy he's been playing a lot of. I'll probably play a lot of too.
He's also been getting unlucky this year too, a 380 BABIP compared to 330 since 2019. So some things that should be a little more positive, in addition to the fact that Rodriguez is not walking guys a bunch, even though he does have a 1.5 whip, only a 6% walk rate. So yeah, I think Rodriguez a solid play today, and definitely helpful to know that Alex is playing him too. I get the Tampa Bay stacks going against him too. I think that's more though the enthusiasm for Wander being in the mix, and then you also have some cheap price tags. If Manuel Margot is going to be hitting the leadoff spot at 2,700, that certainly makes sense as to why he'd pick up some ownership. But Tampa Bay, I get it hedging a little bit if you are going to play Eduardo Rodriguez, but they don't jump out as good. Like, they've been really bad against left-hand pitching, which I think is part of the case for Eduardo Rodriguez. Like, they're not getting on base either. A 298 on base percentage against lefties as well, 140 ISO. Like, it's been really bad. And maybe Franco being in the mix does change the profile a little bit here, but I just don't see Tampa Bay being a high priority stack. And if they end up owned at all, I think then maybe that's where, I don't know, you just don't take a bunch.
I mean, they felt comfortable getting rid of Adames, who's now with Milwaukee. They felt pretty comfortable unloading him. Franco's, I mean, he's the number one prospect in baseball, and those kind of guys you got to give a little bit of a leg up to. It's not going to be a Vladimir Guerrero situation, I don't think. But in 38 games now with AAA Durham, he's slashing 323, 376, 601 with 7 homers, 35 RBIs, and 30 runs. Also has some stolen base upside, five stolen bases in those 38 games. So there is some stuff in the check. Like, I'm checking a lot of boxes by playing Wander Franco at 2K, but that is once again just going to be a guy who I think is probably going to be a little bit over-owned for tournaments. Play him in cash and enjoy.
All right, next game up, we got Toronto getting 3.6 implied runs going against Sandy Alcantara. Alcantara been improved in terms of strikeouts so far this year, 23.3%, but that would still be under league average, where the year's been around 24%. He has historically been a 20% K rate guy, but Alcantara's main skill, as it has been for the last few years, is run prevention. Only a 3.5% barrel ball rate, which I believe is the best mark on the slate. 5.5 degree launch angle, also pretty low. And Alcantara going against Toronto, I don't think he is the best play to go to. I get the field being there for 8%, but Toronto doesn't strike out a lot, and they do have some dangerous power coming back. But I do think Alcantara, to me, his ability to sort of be just a competent guy in terms of run prevention, and also this strikeout stuff is like a 97.8 mile per hour fastball. It's not normally, I think, what I would have thought of with Sandy Alcantara, but that's where he's been this year. He's good enough that you could play some. I think the main thing, though, is he's good enough, and the park downgrade is significant enough for Toronto that I don't think playing much of Toronto. I guess if the roof is open, that could be different. Right now, it says on Schmancy Schmaps the roof is open, which I don't know about that. But 90% humidity could change the equation. So watch that one, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, on the shows coming up later today. But if that roof is closed, I don't see the reason to play much of Toronto at all.
Yeah, I feel like you're getting middling results by both here. If you were to go to Alcantara, I could see that you'd just kind of put up your 15, 20 or whatever it would be, and that would be fine. But you're still going to have some power opportunities. 111 WRC plus against righties for Toronto on the season. Only a 22.2% K percentage. That's pretty damn good mark. I really don't see any reason that I would want to be picking on Toronto in this spot. Plus, it's not like you're getting any kind of a discount going to anybody else, like in terms of these bats. I mean, Alcantara is 8,700 over on DK. That's fine, but not anything that I'm overly enthusiastic banging the drum for. Been a pretty darn good pitcher this season, but as you said, just not going to be picking on Toronto.
On the other side, we have Ross Stripling going. Ross Stripling is also a guy that you can pick on, and this is another spot, too, where if that roof is open, I think I'd feel a little comfortable about the ownership going to Miami, which does seem a little lofty for these guys, given just how not good they are across the board. The bottom 5 in the projected lineup here, Rojas, Jesus Sanchez, Jorge Alfaro, John Birdie, all these guys under a 130 ISO against right-hand pitching. Really, the only guy who's hit for power and sort of any sort of sample size is going to be Adam Duvall. So maybe you just take a Duvall home run prop. I'll check to see what he is on OddsShopper for that. But you can talk me into the stack of Stripling is that bad, and he's given up. We've actually targeted him on recent slates. But actually, the Stripling projection, as this can't be right. We have projected for 18 fantasy.
Yep.
Okay, so
that's all I've been waiting. I was like, you keep going, because what is
an outrageous
stuff going on here? So over on DK right now, Ross Stripling, 5,700 over on DK has a top 2 pitcher percentage of 11.5, ownership only right around 7%. So there's some leverage to be had with Stripling. I mean, if you're going on the cheap end, I mean, this is just kind of basically a damnation of going to Miami here. If it's going to be anything, I mean, I don't see it. I don't really see why it's going to be that meaningful. I mean, WRC plus against righties, 93 here on the season, 25.1% K percentage. I'm not sure if this is like some recency bias. If Ross Stripling, coming off of his 26-point DK game last time out, we're seeing that those Ks go up. Maybe he's in the inverse where he took the sticky stuff off and now he's like, oh, I've got a feel for it or something. I don't see it. So if somebody can explain that to me, sweet. But right now, if we've got him in for over an 11% chance of being a top 2% pitcher, that's seventh on the entire slate for a mark, and he's getting in under 10%. I'm going to have some against this Miami team. And as you said, Duvall, fine one-off. We know kind of the usual characters for the guys on that side, the guys who hit the ball hard there. I just don't see a lot of potential for me to get to like a stack of Miami here.
Yeah, this is one where I guess you could talk me into that Stripling projection more if the roof is closed. So we'll watch this one closely. And again, I guess there's an article that I'm just reading right now that I guess the national hitters were frustrated playing at Miami because Miami's goal is to keep the roof more open this year. And that's obviously, I don't know why the hitters would be more frustrated, but that's the nature of the beast, I suppose. But either way, definitely a game that I think we'll have a little more color for later on in the day. But
yes,
that Stripling projection right now is an outrageous one to see for a guy who gets hit pretty hard, but does have a 25% carry rate on the year.
I like seeing you realize it in real time. That was the fun part for me. I was like, is he going to get there? Is he going to? Oh yeah, no, definitely a meaningful thing to look at.
Erica and I talked before the show that normally like I get the key points of the slate before the show just because of the timing here and just needing to wake up at a reasonable hour in the 6 o'clock hour rather than the 5 o'clock hour. And sometimes you miss things like Ross Stripling having a 3x projection for himself. So that's a wild one.
Yeah, it's I think they're going to change. That's got to move at some point in time. This is absurd.
Yeah, maybe some more justifiable projections. This one, Atlanta 3.5 implied runs going against Marcus Stroman. Marcus Stroman, a guy we talked about recently that I still just don't see the value in getting to a bunch of 22.2% carry rate on the year, 21% since 2019. And he is facing an Atlanta team that strikes out at a 25% clip, who should find issues with him keeping the ball down pretty well. 5-degree launch angle, 7% barrel ball rate. But Stroman to me, just a guy that on a slate this big, I don't see the reason to get to. The field, thankfully today, will also not be getting near to 3% ownership. He's had decent days recently, so I feel like you got to talk about him, but almost 90% humidity at Citi Field today is not the best mark, though. 65-degree weather is still going to keep that mostly in check. But Stroman, to me, I don't necessarily want to be here for 9,600, Eric, on DK. I'd rather go Charlie Morton on the other side, but he's also going to be chalkier. So do you have any interest in Stroman or the Atlanta Bats?
Stroman defies everything that I know about pitching because it seems like he's giving up a lot of hard contact because he is 47.1% hard hit percentage. His X-slugging 437, so we can expect some extra base hits here in this spot. Under 25% K percentage, 22.3 on the season. I'd say the one thing he does is he limits dudes walking, a 5.7% walk percentage, but I just don't see what it is that he's been doing to really kind of get by here. I mean, 3 consecutive games of 25 plus DK points. There's got to be a reason that we're talking about him here, but there's just he just seems like he's living on a prayer. He gives up like those solo shots here in spots. He gave up a homer against the Cubbies, one against San Diego. So, I mean, those hard hits are turning into home runs. It just seems like he's doing everything else well to just kind of get by. 8 Ks the last 2. I just don't see how he's doing this. And against Atlanta, I mean, there's a reason that he's going to be super low owned. I mean, that would be the only reason to take shots there, but God, just not a pitcher that I ever like to roster. I'm very surprised that he has nearly a 10% chance of being a top 2% pitcher, and ownership down around 3%. Maybe I'll get a couple shares there, but I just don't like it.
Yeah, the one thing you could point to is the swinging strike rate's been up a good amount, 12.1%, chase rate 36%. And if you go across to the other side, like Charlie Morton, also a 12.2% swinging strike rate and a 30% chase rate, and he has a 26% strikeout rate for himself. So that could just be that Stroman stuff isn't quite as good, and it could be that these last 2 games are where maybe he should be at. So to me, he's a guy I think to watch a little more closely, and maybe you can take some shots here. If he's going to be 3% owned and he's going against Atlanta with a 25% carry rate, I just think it comes with some risk, and but the underlying numbers are there a little more than I think I was giving credit for initially. So keep that in mind. Charlie Morton, though, on the other side, as I mentioned, comparable numbers to Stroman in terms of swinging strike rate and chase rate, but better strikeout numbers overall with a 26.2% K rate. He does have more velocity, 95.5 miles per hour on the fastball. And he's facing a Mets team, though, that strikes out under league average for what the average is this year, 23.5%, 142 ISO. Morton, to me, I think a fine enough play, though 20% ownership feels kind of like there's some risk and maybe some value going to Mets bats and a little bit of volume, but Morton does keep the ball down, 8-degree launch angle, 5% barrel ball rate, and that's pitching in Atlanta for most of the time, which hasn't been as hot as it normally is, but still, a decent park upgrade usually. I think Morton's fine at 20%, and I feel like that, to me, just being with the field here, I wouldn't go above it, but I think being with the field is probably the right move.
Other than that ace Ross Stripling, I think he's the guy underneath 8K that we've got to be looking at. I say that I couldn't keep a straight face. It's fine. Charlie Morton, 7,300. It makes sense. He's the guy under 8K that if I want to be going over the field on somebody, would be Morton, but the field's pretty high already there, 22%. Pitching isn't something I'm super concerned with, like getting that different on. There's a reason Garrett Cole's going to be 42% owned and Giolito's going to be 35% owned. I try to mix and match a little bit more. And as I said, I do have spin concerns on the top end for some of these guys, and we'll see how this ends up panning out over the course of a couple of weeks. But we're only concerned about today. I think that what we've seen out of Morton here of late is enough that I do want to kind of be going there in a meaningful way against this Mets team that I just don't believe in very much. I think that there are strikeouts available for a guy like Morton. Throws an array of pitches. I like playing some Morton here.
Next game up, we got the Cardinals getting 4.3 implied runs against Tyreek Skubal. And Skubal in the air continues to just keep getting results, even though he is walking a tightrope, I feel like, of power with a 14% barrel ball rate and a 19-degree launch angle. So, again, just the numbers here sometimes talk about just pitchers begging you to tee off on him. The thing with Skubal, though, is he's getting a gigantic strikeout rate of 28% on the year. Though the swinging strike rate, 12%, chase rate, 29%, he probably should be closer to that Morton range or where Stroman can get around 25 to 26%, you would think. It's me, Skubal, going against a St. Louis team that doesn't strike out a lot and also gets on base pretty well, 320 clip. I feel like this is a spot where the Skubal recent renaissance is going to kind of fall off a little bit here. He needs to figure out the walk stuff too, an 11% walk rate. This St. Louis team where you have a bunch of guys who get on base pretty well, the top four in the order, all guys over a 370 on base percentage. I think this is a real dangerous spot for him. So to me, that's why I like the strikeout prop or on the under on that one on PrizePicks, and same thing for the sports books out there as well. I just think Skubal has it today. I get people taking stabs at the price tag, though it looks like they won't even be doing that with 1.5% ownership. I think going to the Cardinals here, you can do it a little bit more. Not the best hitting conditions in Detroit, 40% humidity, 68-degree weather. But I think they can get to Skubal here, so I like the Cardinals bats a little bit, even though they do currently look overowned according to the top stacks tool.
Yeah, they're starting to come alive a little bit, though. I mean, you've got your top guys. I mean, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado. I don't think there's any knock you can really have against them. And Nolan Arenado not hitting the ball as hard as you would expect this season. He's got some regression. Tyler O'Neill, definitely put him into the fray here too. Saw that ESPN feature on him. He is an interesting dude. Plays a lot of piano too, so I respect him in those regards. I digress. We're not talking about that. Skubal sucks outside of his K percentage. Like, it's a play both sides of it kind of spot. If you want to be taking a couple shots on him, he is only 6,400 over or 6,600 over on DK. I have no problems getting to a little bit there, but as you said, I think the St. Louis bats do look really intriguing here as well. 4.8 implied total, one of the larger ones we're going to have on the slate. It seems like everybody that isn't going to be Houston, that isn't going to be the Cubs, that isn't going to be Seattle, you're going to get a pretty flat ownership. I mean, right now, top stack percentage of 5% for them. Ownership a little bit above that. I don't think they're going to go overlooked by any means, but definitely can cause some damage up against Skubal.
Yeah, I think a mini stack here going to be probably the most appealing option.
Yes.
But again, just that, 5 out of the top 6 here, all guys get on base pretty well, who also draw walks really well. I think this is going to be a spot where Skubal could be in some trouble here, and the team can certainly capitalize. At least one guy here can capitalize and probably knock in a couple of base runners. Johan Oviedo going on the other side. He's been pretty mediocre as well, 19% K rate, 4.9 xFIP. So a low launch angle, though, does mean that maybe he's not going to give up a ton of home run power. 6.3 degrees, 8% barrel ball rate. The walk's really the issue, though, where 12% walk rate for him is not a good mark. Oviedo, to me, probably not a guy you should be playing. And the Detroit bats, I guess you could get to, though. They're going to be owned a little bit, and I really don't want to play Detroit if they're going to be owned at all. So to me, probably a stay away over here for Detroit or Oviedo.
He's not a good fantasy pitcher by any means. I mean, he had one outing against Philly with 7 Ks. Otherwise, just doesn't really have a ceiling to him on this slate. Even 6,200. I would rather play Skubal. I would rather play Erod. I would rather play, going up to Morton at 7,300. There's just so many other more intriguing options. Can he get by and put up 20? Yeah, he probably could against this Detroit team. We know the kind of K rate that they can have, the highest K rate against righties on the season, 26.9%, WRC plus of 90. So there is definitely an opportunity to pitch well against Detroit. No question there. But his profile doesn't make it seem like he has any kind of a ceiling that I would want to roster today.
Next game up, Cleveland getting 3.6 implied runs against Kyle Hendricks. Kyle Hendricks almost 10K on DraftKings. I'm just going to say, as a guy I would not want to play today. Adbert Alzolay had a tough time last time out, and he's a guy who actually gets strikeouts. I think, not that it's always going to be apples to apples like that. In fact, we actually encourage you to not think that way, but still, I just to make my case in one more way, I just don't think you could pay this price tag for Kyle Hendricks. 19% K rate on the year, 270 batting average allowed. And Cleveland going against him, like Kyle Hendricks just kind of cobbles together decent days enough that I don't see the Indians being the most appealing either. So to me, no Kyle Hendricks and no Cleveland Indians, I think will be in order.
That would be the answer. I don't see anything that I like in this entire spot for them. I mean, we're going to talk about the Cubbies. They're the second most popular team, but we can just move on. I do not want to play a 9,800 Kyle Hendricks over on DK, and I do not want to be taking any Cleveland Indians. If I had to play one, go ahead. Just play that Bobby Bradley one off. Like, that seems to be the spot. Go Bobby Bradley and maybe Jose Ramirez as another addition to it. One of the best hitting third basemen in baseball, has a ceiling against absolutely anybody. But outside of those two, no shot I'm getting to anybody.
On the other side, we're going to have Elijah Morgan going against the Cubs. Cubs stack will be really well owned. In fact, looking like the most over-owned team perhaps on the slate. But it does make sense going against Elijah Morgan or Eli Morgan, depending upon the naming you're looking at. But it was given up a 406 batting average so far this year. Only faced 35 batters, so it's a very small sample size. But that'd be good for a 2.4 whip, a 5.8 xFIP, and a 9% home run rate. So very bad marks for Morgan so far. Also 15% barrel ball rate, 19-degree launch angle. The Cubs ownership, I get it. And the wind also blowing out to left, though only 7 miles per hour. So it's not going to be a huge boost, but enough to point out here that the Cubs total, I very much get the stack being here. I get the logic with it. I think Javi Baez, after getting pulled yesterday because he didn't know the outs in the game, maybe something that he'll come out swinging a little more. And as a guy who does have some fire in him, but overall, the Cubs stack to me looks pretty good. But the ownership you probably have to watch with a lot of guys here. Chris Bryant, Baez, and Wilson Contreras, all going to be decently owned. Jock Peterson, also top home run odds on the day, and I think that prop is the one that's me might appeal the most out of everything. But Eric, how are you feeling about the Cubs bats, and I guess how are you going to approach them with them looking like one of the chalkier teams on the slate?
So we'll see if I can pick and choose some one-offs here, because I think that would be kind of the way that I would want to go about it. As you said, the guy that I always write up a just play blank. And Jock Peterson against a righty with the wind blowing out. This Elijah Morgan dude, right now he's sitting at 11.4%. I don't think that that's extreme enough at 4,700 that I wouldn't want to be playing quite a bit of that as a one-off. But Wilson Contreras and Chris Bryant coming in right around 20% over on DK right now. I would have no interest in playing them or putting this together as a stack by any means. I think I'd be picking and choosing a little bit of spots for some one-offs. I think Rizzo, Jock Peterson, two guys that I would definitely have some interest in if they're going to come in under 10%.
All right, next game up, we got Oakland getting 4.7 implied runs, and my goal of getting this show done in an hour quickly flying out the window, so sadly, but we got 6 games left. Can we get 6 games done in 6 minutes, Eric? You think you got a shot?
Well, I was going to say, I think we can go a little bit over. I think we were scheduled
I know.
for
We
15.
got an extra 15 minutes.
I bet we can get this done by 9:10 our time, 12:10 for you idiots out east. No, it's fine.
I like you calling them idiot. A classic.
No, I love them all. We all love you guys so much. It's just simply, if you can live on the West Coast is the best coast. I like waking up and watching sports immediately, having soccer on.
And I like waking up at 6:30 a.m. to prepare for MLB content.
But you get to hang out with me. Yay.
Yeah, boy, waking up early, hanging out with Eric, two of my favorite things. Oakland 4.7 implied runs going against Taylor Hearn. Taylor Hearn, a glorified opener, maybe a little bit more than that, should yield to a Texas bullpen who's not that good, though. They do have a 4 xFIP on the year. It's actually not a terrible mark by bullpen standards, but high fly ball rate. Also, decent home run rate of 3.14% on the year, 1.4 whip. So the bullpen's not great, but probably closer to mediocre than awful outright. Taylor Hearn also 25% K rate for himself, walking guys at a high clip, 11% too. Oakland bats, I could certainly get there a little bit, especially if the roof is going to be open, which currently looks like it is according to the roof thing. So again, we'll see how that goes throughout the day, because that does change a lot throughout the course of a day. But Taylor Hearn, not a guy I think you should be playing today. Oakland bats, I think you should get some exposure, and they currently look under-owned in the top stacks tool. So I think that's another one there. All the data pointing in the right direction.
Second straight day that you can just fire up Oakland bats. And I think you can do it without any reservation. You can get as much of it as you want on this slate, and it wouldn't be wrong. I mean, Taylor Hearn just not going to be very good. This entire team, this entire Texas Rangers bullpen, I mean, it's just a great spot. We know the amount of power that can exist up and down this lineup here for the Oakland Athletics. Even in the 9-hole, you get a guy like Chad Pinder, who has a 58.2% hard hit percentage that was playing down there last night. Matt Olson, Jed Lowry, Roman Laureano, all the guys that are hitting the ball pretty darn hard. All three of those guys too on the top end, launch angles above 10 degrees, 16.5 for Lowry, 16.6 for Matt Olson. Matt Olson just in the middle of a renaissance season after a down year last year, a guy I was just very, very bullish on in year-long drafts. So I'm very, very excited about getting to a lot of Oakland A's today.
And Herndon's been getting pretty hard by righties, as you might expect from a not great lefty. 1.8 whip, 200 ISO allowed to righties so far over his sample size last season and change. So keep that in mind here. Definitely some home run upside, I think, especially if that roof is going to be open. Cole Irvin going on the other side for Oakland. Cole Irvin, not a good pitcher either. So probably I don't get the $7,800 price tag for him at all. 16.4% K rate for him, 4.7 xFIP, a 17-degree launch angle, just pretty close to optimal as well there. Irvin, to me, not a play, and you can talk me into some Texas bats if the roof is open again. Some of them were, I think, on the cusp of being tournament winning plays yesterday. This spot, though, I think they're perfectly fine going against Cole Irvin, and not the highest probability to be a top stack, only 3.1%, but 1.2% ownership, I think, is kind of appealing. So to me, more Texas than Cole Irvin. Do you like either side, Eric?
Yeah, I like Texas as well. I think that's definitely going to be the side. I'm definitely not going to be playing any Cole Irvin on a 14-game slate. Giving up, nearly 90 mile per hour exit velocity average on the season, X slugging 471, low K percentage 16.4%. Not walking, dudes don't really care. I think this Texas lineup is definitely undervalued. A team that I would be very, very over top of the field if we were to go into this slate with the current what we have over on the Top Stacks tool, which I believe is free today. So definitely check that out. Make sure that you're refreshing that as it goes, because being so sensitive, just like we were on Live Before Lock and things were changing with Houston here and there and trying to figure out where the field's going to be going. Leveraging your lineups is just such an important part of playing MLB DFS if you're hopping over from NBA for the first time. So be aware that going to some of these stacks here, as long as they are going to be low owned, regardless of, only a 3% top stack percentage or whatever, I'm going to say that that's negligible as long as they're unowned, because you're just getting such a great opportunity to go to them. They have power up and down the lineup, fire them up.
All right, next game up, we got the Giants getting 4.2 implied runs against Andrew Heaney. The Giants on the year, 108 WRC plus, 22.8%, K rate going against left-hand pitching, 181 ISO. And I think Heaney, the kind of guy that should be a little bit of a park upgrade. The San Francisco has played a little better for power recently, but the Angel Stadium has been one of the better power parks over the last few seasons. So I think the spot for Heaney, 14% ownership going his way. I get it with the price tag and the 29% K rate he has on the year, but I think I'd be more inclined to take some of the Giants bats going against them, because they have enough power hitters here, guys who drive the ball. And Heaney, a 90 mile per hour average exit velocity, not the best mark either. Giants bats, I think it looks like going to be mostly unknown. Only guy picking up ownership right now is going to be Austin Slater, because he's cheap and expected to be in the leadoff spot. But you go to Yastrzemski, you can go to Darren Ruff, you can go to Wilmer Flores. Those guys jump out as having pretty good splits against left-hand pitching. And Heaney, no stranger to giving up power to righty bats in particular as well. So this spots me. I think the Giants might be more of a mini stack team, but still, I think you can get there for the full stack. And I think going against Heaney for that ownership, especially if it comes up, I think it's a really appealing move.
Dude, they're surprised. Like this entire Giants team. I mean, I would say, would you call them the surprise of the season so far?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just getting sustainable results, I like Detroit being competent at all at any point. I feel like it's a surprise, but yeah, I feel like the Giants relative to being pretty good. Yeah.
Well, and against lefties, they don't K very much. And the 108 WRC plus, I think it was Gundacker who's talked a lot about, I always target the Giants up against lefties. I will say against righties, they're pretty good too. 111 RC plus, WRC plus, 25.8% K percentage there. So there are more strikeouts available, but up against the lefty here, I mean, these Giants can just kind of inflict some damage. And I think I do like the mini stack aspect of it, but I can't really say that these lefties aren't exactly going to be unappealing to me either. I think that there's a number of guys like Crawford, who's hitting the ball harder than he's ever hit it. Brandon Belt, both of those guys over 47% hard hit percentage here on the season. Super low or super high walk rates as well. So they can keep the line moving. So there's some opportunities for them to get on base in a number of ways and keep the line moving. I could see it going both ways. I'll have a little bit of Heaney, but I'll definitely have over the field of the Giants if the slate started right now.
The Angels going against DeSclafani on the other side, 4.8 implied runs for them. Show Ohtani could be one of the chalkiest players on the slate, which does make sense given DeSclafani has struggled historically pretty mightily against left-hand hitters, a 5.3 xFIP, 1.5 whip, 207 ISO allowed. And Ohtani, I think probably the best one-off on the slate, or maybe one of the best one-offs on the slate. That's actually too bold of a take to give right here, but definitely going to be owned like it as well. So I like Ohtani. I think the stack might be a little more appealing to get there. Just try to defer some of that Ohtani ownership. But to me, I think they are a team that should be viable for bats. And I don't want to go to DeSclafani. I never really want to go to DeSclafani, but a 22% K rate going against the Angels, who do strike out a little bit under league average, 23.7%. And they do have a 107 WRC plus against right-hand pitching. So they are performing better than league average there as well. I think the Angels bats are the more appealing side, Eric, but how do you feel about them?
Yeah, I mean, Ohtani just hits the ball hard and puts up points. It's just ridiculous. 22, 30, 18, 18, over a 1 OPS on the season. It's just ridiculous how good this guy is at everything. He's good at throwing baseballs, at least getting Ks, should I say. And then he's phenomenal hitter. A little bit underpriced as well. I would say 5,400 for him, as opposed to looking at guys like Acuna at 6,500 in his spot and Stanton. I mean, it's going to make sense. If you're playing cash and you don't play Ohtani, I really don't know what to tell you today. But as he said, he's going to be a very, very popular one-off. I would expect him to be over 20% owned, even on a 14-game slate. That would be your reason to get off. Just kind of hope that he doesn't kill you with the long ball here. But man, he just keeps doing it time and time again. Hard not to have some exposure there.
All right, next game, we got the Dodgers, 3.8 implied runs going against Blake Snell. Snell, a 30.4% K rate on the year. The swinging strike and chase rate numbers and maybe some of the sticky stuff things I think could be concerns for Blake Snell. But still a guy, price tag's reasonable. The ownership won't be there a bunch. I think Blake Snell, to me, more appealing to some of the guys we've talked about in this price range, including Andrew Heaney in the last game. I'm willing to take that stab against a Dodgers lineup that is not quite as good as normal, though I think they are expected to get some guys back here. And they do hit lefties a little better as well. Pujols actually has been viable against lefties for the last few years, the 261 ISO. Even Steven Souza so far is hitting lefties a lot better in his return to baseball. 353 ISO for him against lefties. Small sample size, so that's going to come down to normal marks. But still, they have enough guys who could hit lefties that you're probably taking on some risk with Snell, but it's a low total, Eric, and I feel like Snell in the spot. Also worth pointing out, 80% humidity in San Diego again, so maybe that ball flies a little bit more, but Snell shouldn't be 3% owned, I feel like. To me, I think you got to be at least 10% Snell.
Yeah, you do, but also the guy's just not been very good, and you want to say sticky stuff or whatever. His last start was in Colorado, so I guess we can kind of write that off. We saw the upside against the Mets. We know that he can go on both sides of it. That was his only game that he went for 101 pitches against the Mets 2 starts ago, and then it's been everything else has been pretty concentrated. Only 71 pitches against the Mets, 75 against Colorado. I don't know if at 8,400 he can still get to a large enough pitch count against these Dodgers to really be crazy viable. He would have to get rolling quick in order to get there. I would expect with this Dodgers lineup that we're looking at that 24% K percentage, projected K percentage that I've got for them against lefties here for that lineup. Basically flat, 99 WRC plus against lefties on the entire season. Not a spot to be picking on Dodgers, but yeah, if he's going to be 3%, you got to have a little bit more for a guy with that much K upside.
Yeah, honestly, 10% now I'm looking at it, especially with how much he's walking guys, a 13% walk rate on the year. He is going against a Dodgers team that should be pretty good at drawing some walks and get on base. All these guys really above a 310 clip, at least on base percentage. Some of them, a lot of them above a 350. There's definitely a risk profile here for Blake Snell. So I guess maybe to me, I'd still get more than the Fields ownership if it's going to be at 3%, but I think maybe Dodgers bats could be a little more in order. And definitely they are going to be drawing some walks in the spot. Clayton Kershaw going to the other side against the Padres. Padres bats clearly very important yesterday going against Urias, which was just so upsetting. Poor Urias got tagged so early and they could never dig out of it. Not fun. Clayton Kershaw, though, another lefty going, and he'll be 29% carry on the year, 1.01 whip, 2.9 xFIP, and really not, Urias, for whatever his strengths were, he was a guy that gave up a little bit more close to suboptimal launch angles and barrel ball rates. Kershaw, 6.4% barrel ball rate, 10.4 degree launch angle, and I'm willing to go right back to the spot at 9,200 as a price tag for Kershaw, only 17% ownership, basically makes him flat with his odds to be a top pitcher, but I think it's a spot to go back to again. So I'm willing to go to Kershaw. I think I would have more than a field of them to me. One of those guys I'd be willing to get to 25% of, but how are you feeling about Kershaw here? And are you willing to go back to Padres bats to target again against a lefty and maybe they have success one more time?
Yeah, you could absolutely, if you're going to be going cheap on the pitching end, you can go to Machado, you can go to Tatis, you can make that your contrarian spend up. Maybe not Jake Cronenworth. Maybe he won't burn us this time around. What a joke. But, whatever. Such is life. He was 1% owned. I guess that was definitely a reason to be going. Not a guy who's been hitting lefties well at all, but the Padres saw something we didn't, and that was the winner. You needed to pretty much have Cronenworth on DK or FanDuel to win anything. You could maybe throw him in, but 4,700, you don't really need to. I would much rather just say, hey, I'll go to Machado, a guy who's just bashes lefties. Fernando Tatis, 6,300, your most expensive shortstop at a position with a lot of like really nice options, especially you've got a 2K dude down there, that Tampa Bay shortstop that just got called up, the number one prospect kid that we talked about earlier, Flores or whatever his name was.
Wander Franco.
Franco. Yeah, it's Flores Franco. There we go. But he's going to be phenomenal. But either way, Fernando Tatis, 6,300, just a contrarian spend up.
Yeah, I could certainly see that. Never an issue taking a low-owned Tatis, and that price tag, though, getting pretty egregious at 6,300 on DK. Last game on a slate, Colorado getting 3.7 implied runs against Chris Flexen. Flexen has been useful recently, 89 pitch count so far in his appearances this year, and the K rate's not there. Like, it's a 16% K rate for him on the year, 2.5% on run rate. He is going against Colorado, outside of Colorado, so maybe he can get results just by being able to have that high pitch count, as well as a low launch angle, 8.7 degrees, 7% barrel ball rate. Flexen, I think, is a usable value. I don't have a ton of faith in him, and the fact that he has the one good game recently makes me worry that ownership could come up a little bit more. But I think he might be better than it seems. I don't know. The swing strike rate's not really there. The chase rate's pretty good in a way that if these guys are incompetent, which I think they are, then maybe he can sort of get them to chase a little bit more. So to me, Flexen 5,500, I'm willing to take that stab, Eric. But Colorado bats, I also think not the most utility to go to. So that's really the main case you can make for Chris Flexen.
If they can be incompetent, I think we can go there. Chris Spags, I love that.
Look,
I think
it's a bold take. I know, looking for the Rockies to be incompetent when not in Coors.
Yeah, no, it's not going to happen. They're completely dog shit. So I have to be kind of siding with you there as well. 71 WRC plus up against righties on the season. That's the worst by a ways. I mean, you've got Arizona that just lost a zillion games in a row here on the road, and they're at 80. So that should let you know, up against right-handed pitching, there is not a better spot to be limiting damage than this Colorado lineup outside of Coors Field. Again, that's an adjusted stat for ballpark. So I do like going to Chris Flexen if at 5.5K. Obviously is not going to be a guy that you want to get in any kind of a meaningful way. He's 2.4% chance of being a top 2% pitcher, 1.6. But if you're going to be punting down there to the bottom end and you want to try to make something work, I find it unlikely that he racks up a bunch of Ks against this Colorado Rockies team, but I find it very unlikely that he also hurts you. So if he, along with another cheapie, allows you to get somewhere else and none of these pitchers go off for a crazy amount of upside, I'm basically just saying Chris Flexen, sure, have a couple shares, but don't get weird.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. And he's more the price point play than anything. And again, it's a high pitch count where $5,500, normally you're not getting a guy with a 90 pitch count for his appearances. And he doesn't walk guys a bunch either. So I don't think he's going to necessarily drive that pitch count up. So if he could be efficient and just get those outs and give you 5 innings, which he's been doing normally anyway, 5.5 innings per appearance, I think that's sort of what you're hoping for out of Chris Flexen. Kyle Freeland going on the other side. He's a guy normally you do want to target. 11% strikeout rate on the year, 9% home run rate. He does weirdly have a low launch angle overall, but it does seem like when guys are getting to him, they're getting to him pretty well. 17% barrel ball rate for Kyle Freeland so far with the 106 batters he's faced this year. And Seattle going to be owned way too much, which is the frustrating part here because there aren't a lot of great spots I feel like to target for the bats where that are going to obviously jump out. But Freeland going to get some of these guys. Tom Murphy's raked against lefties for a few years. Mitch Haniger as well. Kyle Seager also not bad against lefties. I get the ownership for some of these guys. Dylan Moore, maybe you could sort of talk a little bit less about getting that ownership, but he's been driving the ball pretty well with an 18-degree launch angle, so I'm willing to get there. But a lot of ownership for the Seattle stack, Eric, and that's really the main thing you could say that gives me some concern, but it's a high total, so I get it. I just don't think you should have these guys as much as the field's going to be. If Murphy, Moore are going to be over 20%, that's like a lot of Mariners.
I don't like to say your basic stats too much on MLB shows because I like to, look at your advanced metrics, trying to predict the future, seeing what they're doing. But this is worth saying. Kyle Freeland in 5 starts this season, 9.58 ERA, 2.27 WHIP. Need I say more? You should have some Seattle interest without question. The guy is just Oh, he's so bad. I mean, he's so bad. And I was looking at this, I was going to say last night, early this morning, I was looking at this Seattle team as a team that had a ton of interest in, going to all of these righties up top, as well as Kyle Seager, a guy that I play against everybody. But Mitch Haniger, Kyle Seager, Ty France has always been cheap here, although it kind of falls off a little bit of a cliff here in the hard hit percentage once you go down below him. But God, it's such a good spot. I will say, if you're going to play devil's advocate, if you want to point at one thing why you maybe don't want to be stacking them, 7.7 launch angle for Kyle Freeland, maybe a death by a million cuts thing where everybody's singling and doubling their way in. And you don't necessarily get a lot of those big homers that you'll need on a 14 gamer to really spike an upside, but it's hard not to have some Seattle today.
Yeah, I think that's the logic there. That watch the ownership here, because they can certainly be a very highly owned team with the value they present, and also the fact they're probably going to come up a lot in optimizers. I guess probably everybody besides Mitch Haniger, who's the one pay up option that you could probably get to, and probably the guy who's the most likely to have a good day. Though I do enjoy Tom Murphy historically as a catcher option. We got some shows coming up later today. In fact, we will have the MLB Deeper Dive and the Live Before Lock show. It'll be Eric on the Deeper Dive, I believe, with Greg coming up at starting at 4:45 Eastern today, so that's not too far from now. So come join us then. And I'll be on the Live Before Lock show with Terry doing that one. So come hang with us for both of those. Of course, make sure to check out the Awesemo podcast network so you can hear shows like this one after the fact without watching it on YouTube. If you don't want to pay for that YouTube premium to be able to listen on your phone, it's much easier to get to the podcast network. So go check them all out at awesemo.com/podcast. Make sure to follow at Eric Lindquist, follow at Chris Spags, follow at awesemo_com, and make sure to play over at PrizePicks, where they're giving you $100 deposit match if you use the promo code Awesemo. So download them in the App Store or in Google Play today. But go check them out and use that promo code Awesemo for the $100 deposit match. Simplify daily fantasy with PrizePicks. We appreciate you guys for being here. Enjoy the rest of your days. Good luck.